Well, welcome back to Speaking Llama, a Survivor podcast. I'm flying solo tonight without Caleb, but so excited to be here with the latest castaway out of Titans versus Rebels. We've got Scott on the podcast. Scott, how are you?
Hello, I'm good. Thanks for having me. Last night was wild, but I'm in one piece and we're still
We'll take it.
surviving.
That's good. That's good. Well, Scott, I've got lots of questions about your game. And I know after last night's Tribal Council, the decision you made to leave the game, fans watching the show are probably having lots of different reactions to that. So my hope is to just be able to provide some space, some context for you to share your perspective. And would love to kick off our conversation to hear more about your overall game. So we didn't get to see a whole lot of your game, unfortunately, this season, but would love to hear kind of those three parts of the game. So the Rebels tribe before the swap, that Titans tribe after the swap, and then those last few days on the merge tribe. What was your experience in those three different points of the game? What was going on from your vantage point? Anything you want to share from those three perspectives?
Yeah, awesome. So the Rebels Beach was pretty relaxed compared to the sort of second and third part of the game. It was a bit more just making friends, and making sure you're aligned with everyone. I tried really hard to just create like a really nice and genuine foundation with pretty much every person on the beach. And I felt like I did that. I had a great friend in Kirby, I had a great friend in Ferris, but then what wasn't maybe necessarily seen on TV was the friendship I had with Eileen and with Garrick. The three of us bonded pretty much straight away, and we thought, what an unlikely alliance, the three of us coming together and just playing from the shadows and making sure we're just kind of observing everything and keeping everyone in the loop. And that saw us all, into the second part of the game, and we were all having a great time playing that way. I also played so much with Raymond. Raymond was like my little brother out there, and we had so many fun moments and just genuine moments out there. And that made it pretty easy to chat game as well whenever we got a chance. So that was the priority in the Rebels tribe. And then honestly, that felt like it went in a blink of an eye. And the night we went to vote Kelly over to the Titans tribe, I think that night, obviously, things looked like they were going towards Rihanna going home, which I was going to vote that way that night because I felt like I was more with Eileen and Garrick and I needed to show some loyalty there. But the moment we got to tribal council, I just remember thinking, oh, bad decision. This was the wrong decision. I just felt that gut feeling and was like, no, what are we doing? And then thank God they threw that twist in. And suddenly it was Kelly being sent over to Titans. So I kind of got to go back to camp and reassess and be like, okay, I know where mentally I'm at now, who I want to play with. And from that point on, I was pretty much Kirby loyal the entire time. I was still chatting with other people. I never cut off ties. I don't think that's something you should ever do there, but I knew who I needed to show my loyalty to and who I wanted to sort of chat a game with and actually really move forward with. So then going into Titans, when I found that I got the same buff as Kirby, I was like, thank God, this is awesome. And obviously seeing you're on the right side of the numbers helps massive amount too. And felt pretty lucky that out of the OG Titans too, like Valeria, Winner, and Charles were all people I was excited to meet. Valeria's furry jacket alone was enough reason for me to want to meet her. And they were all lovely. They are such cool characters. And it was not hard at all to make real, genuine connections with them and do exactly what I'd just done on the Rebels Beach, but with these three new Titans. Um, and that's, I think, what maybe, I mean, obviously it will come from Charles and Valeria and Winner themselves, but I think that's maybe what helped sway them towards me and Kirby too, was that me and Kirby weren't even really talking game with them. We were sort of just making friends. And that seemed to be their play style, which we didn't necessarily know at the time. We were just playing it cool and taking our time. And then thank God we obviously didn't go to tribal the first one or two, I think, there. So we had a bit longer to really cement a bond. It wasn't straight in where it was like, oh, crazy times. And I'm really thankful we had that time because I think that worked in our advantage. And then merge obviously was for basically 2 days for me. The reward challenge and then the immunity challenge and then the crazy sort of scramble before that tribal and then that sort of memorable tribal moment. But I remember just getting to that individual challenge and being like, oh my God, we're at merge. Obviously, that challenge was something you've seen somewhat before in the
Yeah.
US. And to play that game was so fun to have that balance beam and that ball. I was like living the dream. But no one can prepare you for it, like you're up there and it's so difficult. And then you add in the torrential rain coming in. And
Mhm.
I'm just like looking at Valeria and seeing this perfect poise. And I'm just like, this dancer's body over there knows like how to walk the catwalk. And then there's me being gangly and like one of those things outside a car dealership, just blowing in the breeze. And was like, oh, I've got no hope.
Oh wow. Yeah, that's a perfect image. The car
It's
salesman.
not
I
hard.
love that. Yeah. Gosh, yeah, such an iconic challenge. And then that other challenge, that you participated in for immunity, I mean, that looked incredibly difficult to complete.
Oh, it was nuts. My sister was messaging me last night and she was like, this reminds me of that horrible machine we used to have in the garage when dad tried to have like an at-home gym and it had the little leg thing on it.
Yep.
And I was like, I don't need reminding of that.
But very impressive for all of you to do that. Well, I'm curious too, getting into last night, getting into the vote and the tribal council, would love to hear kind of from your perspective, at what point in that scramble or leading up to tribal or at tribal did you make that decision of, hey, I think I need to leave the game? When did that happen?
Um, I was a few different times.
Mhm.
On the beach, it was obviously going through my head a lot, and I'd had a really honest conversation with Kirby. It happened a few times before in the game too, which obviously just doesn't show as much on TV, and there's not that much time to show that. And I had luckily people like Kirby and Garrick out there who were really good at pulling me through it and just talking to me. And a lot of those conversations happened at night in the tent or in the camp. Like a lot of mine and Garrick's gameplay and conversations happened a lot, off camera. And that's when he was really helpful for me. So it's not like it was the first time, but it was definitely the hardest one and it felt darker. And I was like, oh, this isn't good. I've had this before in life. And,
Mhm.
years ago, I'd had something similar happen and you just never know when it's going to pop up. Right. It was just the worst timing for something
Mhm.
like that to possibly pop up when I'm finally in Survivor and playing this game. And then I'm like, it's so typical that now, like, why brain? Why now? And I think it was pretty much on the way to tribal council I was like, oh God, how am I gonna bring this up tonight? And how do I do this? Um, and that definitely obviously played a part in me being a bit more emotional at the camp as well and telling Kitty what I did. And I'm still glad I did all of that. But the way I did it was definitely quite like in the moment and very erratic, which isn't at all how I've been playing the game or how I was as a person. So that was, yeah, it was hard to watch a bit of it back last night, but also kind of nice to see it all back and stand by it and be like, oh wow, I see myself spiraling there, and thank God I did what I did. Because who knows what would have happened a week later if I'd have still been there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I want to take a quick detour. You mentioned your
Yep,
conversation with
love a
Kitty. That was
detour.
definitely one question I had for you of what was that motivation into telling Kitty, "Hey, your name's on the chopping block." Was there strategy behind it? Was it more emotions? What was the motivation?
Yeah, it was a bit of both. The night before, when I didn't really have anywhere to sleep, basically that whole night I'd stayed up and I was chatting with Kitty and Eden, and they'd basically said, this is where you're sleeping tonight. You're sandwiched between us, and we're going to keep you safe and warm. And they're so funny, the two of them together. And Kitty is so like cheeky and has the most amazing sense of humor, as does Eden, both so different, but together they're just like this tour de force. And you just get to listen, and it's like a free show. And they were just bringing me up. I felt so like uplifted and better spirits for that. And then the next day, I don't know. Just in that moment, I just didn't like where it was going. And I've said this before, but it's been like on the show, it's quite hard. You see a lot of Kirby's gameplay, and she seems kind of a dictator at times. And it was never once
Mhm.
like that out there, Playing with Kirby felt very open and like a friendship. And we tell each other everything. And I think the same goes for how she played with Rhea as well. There was never, this is how it's going, this is the plan. Kirby was just very forthcoming with her plan. And sometimes I'd be like, no, doesn't it make more sense to do it like this? And she'd say, no, because of this. And, you go back and forth, and that's a great alliance out there. And so I just had complete trust in her. And honestly, there was never a moment I felt like I needed to step out of that and be like, I don't agree with you, because I did genuinely agree with the decisions that were being made and felt like who I wanted to go home was going home most of the time.
Mhm.
So it was only really last night's episode when I felt like I had a difference in opinion and so needed to speak my mind. And I would have done that much sooner if I'd have needed to, but there was just no need to.
Hmm. That's a good point. Yeah. Well,
Like
let's.
honestly, I feel pretty happy with it. Like the way I left, my name hadn't been even put out there or floated by
Mhm.
people once, and I sent home who we wanted to send home. I wrote down their name every time. I felt like I'd played this really shadowy, quiet game getting into Merge, but still managed to be myself and make friendships with people the whole time that I knew I could pull on in Merge if I needed them. And then it's just so annoying that obviously my brain was blindsiding me at the same time and sending me out.
It's a good way to phrase it. Yeah. And yeah, to watch it was really fun, leading up, especially to yesterday of you were playing the shadows. And it's this idea of, oh, I think Scott's actually in a really good spot on this tribe. So it was really fun to watch you this season. Jumping back to tribal council, then, we've seen situations like this in the past in US Survivor, Australian Survivor, and sometimes at tribal council, either JLP or other tribe mates are trying to sway your opinion and convince you to stay. Did that happen at Tribal when you announced, hey, I think I need to leave?
It happened a little bit more really in camp before when people were finding out that that's sort of what I was going through. I remember having a few conversations there, and that was where I really had to just check myself and go inwards and kind of be like, hang on, are these people saying this as a friend or are they saying this because I'm a number? You just don't know what people's motivations are, right? It's Survivor and that's
Hmm.
what it's supposed to be. So you can't hold that against anyone, but you really then need to rely on yourself to be like, well, hang on, like let's have a non-game moment. And luckily Kirby was like, let's go have a chat. And she was great as always out there with me and was just like, you just seem different. This seems different. Is there any like basically can I talk you through it or is that sort of a wall? Is there no point me even trying to do that because this is what you need right now? And I think she kind of got that this was different and that it wasn't going to be good for me staying in that game. And if we did, it would have just literally been a band-aid solution and it would have probably just come back worse 2 or 3 or 4 days later. And equally, I could have been the next vote out. I could have literally been blindsided
Hmm.
the next night. So you have no idea what's coming in Survivor, right? And someone had to go that night. And I just feel I feel very good about how it all went down. I still stand by that decision.
Good, good. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Before we jump into some other topics, any additional context or things we didn't see that you feel like would be important to share that, provide perspective on last night's vote out?
Oh gosh, so much. There's so many stories. And I was so observant out there. I felt like I was watching everything. So there's so many little tidbits and behind the scenes stuff I'd love to just go into depth. But for last night, I think obviously getting to merge, you start getting a feel for who is talking to who and who's giving off certain vibes. And some people give you really good vibes and you just like come and want to talk immediately and you feel really like welcomed. And then others are a bit more standoffish and a bit more cold. And that is such a small thing in real life because you don't have to be friends with everyone. But out there,
Mhm.
that makes such a difference to you because you're like, oh, okay, there's something here. Or all that takes is for you then to get that same energy and then you tell someone else you're feeling a certain way or question that sort of behavior and then they cement that and suddenly that's enough reason for you to both be going against someone and it's crazy because that's just such an in the moment judgment and honestly it was 2 days and especially people like Mark and Jaden but Mark especially, him and Eden went back to the beach to search for idols instead of coming to that feast. So I really hadn't had much time with them. And then Eden I got to have that night with and have so many stories with. So Mark was sadly just the person I didn't really feel like I got a conversation with or a chat at all. So you're conscious of all of that out there, and you're just watching other people and seeing, oh, that's a lot stronger bond than I thought it was.
Mhm.
So I was trying to also just let Kirby know what I was picking up on, especially if I thought I was leaving. I wanted to give her the best possible foot forward as well and be like, I'm not going to be here, so I'm not a number for you, but at least here's some information or what I've observed and what I'd be using going forward. And I think that's where I was kind of trying to give her a heads up about how much closer Valeria and Mark seemed and how I'd been
Mhm.
observing just how good a player Valeria was. and thought, oh God, if she's actually got way more people under her than we're thinking, I don't think Kirby's necessarily on that pecking order where she thinks she might be a lot further down. You saw me throughout the game constantly trying to get her and Ferris to just at least consider working together because I was trying to foster somewhat of a relationship for Merge, knowing we were probably going to need that. And let's just hope that they both sort of went forward with that.
Absolutely. And that's the one thing going into this episode that I was most curious to see what would happen is you have all these different alliances coming together. You have Kirby versus Ferris and the respective alliances of you all. Then you have the middle-aged mafia, but then Valeria and
That's
Mark
so
are
much
going
fun.
against the middle-aged mafia. So for you, how do you make sense of all that? You said you were observing some of these closer relationships. What tipped you off to, Mark and Valeria being closer? Did you see Mark going against Kitty and Caroline? What tipped you off to some of those interactions?
Well, I knew already that Valeria was gung ho on getting out Caroline or Kitty. Like we'd had
Mhm.
that conversation many a times, and we were going to be almost part of that plan. But then obviously I got in quite well with Caroline and Kitty the night before in Eden and thought, actually, no, these are people I could play with. They're rational. They're not sort of like crazy and just want revenge or hell bent on certain things or get something stuck in their head. They can get past something. Um, and then I saw just her and Mark talking constantly, just the two of them. And it was always like, you can tell when it's an intense strat chat. And they were, especially Valeria had her little like sort of genie tent, and they were both chatting behind the curtains in there. And I just remember thinking like, oh, this seems way too intense for it to just be anything like subtle, you know? And
Mhm.
so I could see what you just described. There was this really complicated chain because me and Kirby were working with Valeria, but then Valeria was working with Mark. And we obviously then went to want to work with Ree, and Ree was working with Caroline and Kitty, but then Caroline and Kitty were kind of working with Mark, who was then also against them. So you knew at some point someone was going to have to be the person that cut the chain and was like, okay, we're cementing this is where we stand now. And I just couldn't. I felt like better for the numbers and better for the people we would play with going forward that was us potentially cutting that chain and saying like, okay, we're with Caroline, Kitty, and Eden. Let Mark and Valeria have like Jade and Winner, and then hopefully we can get sort of Ferris and those guys to rationally see that that group is a lot bigger players and threats for
Mhm.
these challenges coming up, like Jaden, Winner, and Valeria. It's like, and Mark in the water. It's like a pretty big threat, all those four. I think that's where my head was at, but obviously 6 months ago too. So this is a lot of just seeing the edit and trying to work out what my head was thinking in that time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, if you can remember too, so going into tribal council, if you had a vote, do you remember who you were planning to vote for? Was it Raymond? Would you have voted Kitty? Do you have any memory of that?
I honestly don't. I think I was out of that camp for so long before that. I was actually
Mhm.
just like I was doing my IV as well. I was off doing my one-on-one with camera, and so I missed a lot of that scrambling between the chat with Kirby and between the chat with then the team doing my bit to cameras, and that was a really an emotional chat. So my head was not really thinking about the game at all. So then getting back to camp, I remember thinking like, oh God, like what's happening tonight? And by that point, you're in, you're not allowed to talk anymore. You're going to tribal council. There's no time. Everyone's mind is kind of made up. So going into that tribal, I was pretty sure I was taking myself out of the game. And getting there and just seeing some of people's attitudes towards the game and how hard people were going at it, it just cemented it. And I was like, look, these people are so ready for merge. Kitty, especially, she seemed pumped up and fired up and ready to go. And I was like, this should be the end of my game for now. Like, I 100% enjoyed my time out there and I would do it again in a heartbeat. And everyone else, even if they've got the same sort of issues, I don't think it should stop people from wanting to go on Survivor. There's space for that out there. People went through all sorts out there. There's not been one medevac shown this season. I think there were like three of us taken out of the game at that point.
Mhm.
There's all sorts going behind the scenes, and there's so many things that could stop people, but it doesn't. Like you keep going, and I think I would urge anyone else out there wanting to do it to just go.
I love that. I love that. Well, Scott, thank you so much for your time today, your vulnerability today. I really appreciated chatting
Awesome.
with you, hearing your perspective. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day and hope you enjoy watching the rest of the season.
Thanks so much, Alex. Thanks for having me. And I can't wait to watch the rest of the season now. Just get to watch all my friends playing Survivor.
There you go. Awesome. Well, Scott, take care.
Thanks, buddy.
Awesome. Thank you.